Hey, Charles D., these places are amazing. You can practically see the stage from here. She's down there, right? That little one over there, about the size of a book. Charles D. chuckled, not paying attention to my teasing. Fuck you, Jake. At least you're sitting in Madison Square Garden going to see your favorite band instead of sitting at home watching NASCAR on TV or whatever you rednecks do on a hot Friday night in August. I smiled back at him. I was from Paterson, New Jersey, which is not a typical redneck, but to Charles D., born and raised on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, anyone living south or west of the George Washington Bridge was a hopeless hick, redneck, okie, or some other redneck. Besides, he continued, check out these binoculars. My last toy. They're incredible when the band takes the stage. You'll be able to count the pimples on Anthony Kiedis's chin, although he's probably too old for acne. We sat in the penultimate row in the gallery, on the highest places in the hall, closest to the ceiling. It was a hell of a long way from the stage, but who cared? Charles D. was right. I was going to spend the evening with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Beth's, and my favorite band for many years. The only thing I missed was having her here with us. We drank a couple of beers and half listened to the performance of the opening band, a completely mediocre jam band whose name I didn't remember. And when the lights came on and the technicians started setting up on stage for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, he handed me the binoculars. Here, look. Even from this distance, you can tell the hot girls from the ones who are just trying to be hot. I took the binoculars, pretending to be surprised. Are you saying you can actually tell one from the other? I looked around at the luxurious boxes on the other side of the hall, then at the best seats on the floor. Charles D. was right, the binoculars were amazing. It was possible to see individual faces with clear features, and even watch their facial expressions as they laughed and talked. I returned the binoculars to him and went to get some beer. When he returned, he pointed out something to me. Look, Jake. In the VIP area on the floor, 5th row, right on the central aisle. There's a blonde in a white dress. She looks just like Beth. I raised the binoculars to my eyes, focused them, and took a few seconds to find the one he was talking about. Then my heart stopped. I lowered the binoculars, took a deep breath, and looked again. Can't be, but looking down, I realized that it was really her. Her hair was loose, falling over the shoulders of one of her most beautiful white dresses, the same one that I remembered well from the last New Year's party where she wore it. Her face was flushed with pleasure and excitement, and she was chatting cheerfully with a tall man of about 40 standing next to her. It was Barton Huntington, that bastard, I thought. As I continued to watch, my mind still refusing to believe what I was seeing, he put his arm around Beth's waist and pulled her towards him tenderly. Instead of moving away, she pressed herself close to him and rested her head on his shoulder for a moment. I turned around and handed the binoculars back to Charles D. I must have looked like death. Charles D., I said, this is Beth. He looked at me with bewilderment. But you said she's working late today? I know, I said quietly. That's what she told me. The call was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon in my office. Beth greeted me warmly and then said with obvious regret in her voice, I'm so sorry, honey. We just need to finish this sentence for Tokyo today. Remember, I told you about the $2 billion deal. And it looks like Barton is going to keep us here until at least 11 tonight. I tried to hide the disappointment in my voice, telling her that I understood that I would miss her, that I would see her later at home. It was understandable. I loved being with my wife and wanted to start the weekend together. But she loved her job, and it was only natural that sometimes she had to stay late. Less than 20 minutes later, I was wondering what to do that evening when Charles D. called me and said that he had managed to get 2 Red Hot Chili Peppers tickets from a friend in the sales department at Bloomingdale's, where he worked as a buyer. Are you free tonight, or do you have plans with your wife? I laughed. I knew that Charles D. doted on Beth, but that didn't stop him from making fun of me for being a henpecked man, which, of course, I was not. He just liked to add fuel to the fire, reminding me how happy and free he was. Actually, Beth is stuck at the office today, and I'd love to come with you. We agreed to meet at Madison Square Garden, and I hung up. I was so excited that I didn't even make fun of him for not being able to find a date to go to the concert. So now it was 9:30 in the evening, and I was wondering what the hell Beth was doing at a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert in her beautiful white dress, and why was that bastard Huntington hugging her, even though she told me they were going to be working late. I pulled out my cell phone to call her, but there was no signal in the Madison Square Garden building. Charles, I need to go down and see her. This is complete nonsense. She's with this idiot, and he even hugs her. In my anger and shock, I called Charles by his nickname, which he hated. His full name was Charles Darwin Emerson Imagine, the parents who could name their son that. He was a distant relative of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and several of us at Wharton, where we met, teased him with that name from time to time. But he hated it, so I tried not to call him that anymore. But now it came out on its own. Okay, Jake, call me when you get there and figure it out. Charles looked like he wanted to say something else, but he stopped himself, and I ran towards the stairs. It was easy to go down. Access to the stage area at Madison Square Garden was made impossible by security guards in bright lime green shirts, none of whom were shorter than 6 feet 4 inches and weighed less than 225 pounds. I bought 2 large beers to keep my hands occupied in case they asked to see my ticket, and confidently headed up the center aisle toward Beth and Huntington. I hadn't even walked 10 steps when a guy who looked like Shaquille O'Neal's cousin blocked my path. "Your ticket, sir?" I gestured to my hands filled with beer. "It's in my pocket." He approached. "Sorry, sir, but I have to see him." I thought for a moment. Why not try honesty? "Listen, I'm actually sitting upstairs, and I just saw my wife as my boss in the 5th row. He allowed himself too much, I just have to go down to her." He looked at me with a cold expression, clearly doubting the veracity of my words. "You're unlucky," he said, not without sympathy, but he still didn't let me through. I retreated and tried to approach from the other 2 sides, but still couldn't get closer than 50 feet. After leaving the beer, I found an empty chair, stood on it, and tried to take a few quick pictures with my phone. The pictures weren't very high quality, but they showed Beth and Huntington, and in a couple of them they were clearly too close to each other. A moment later, the lights dimmed and the noise level skyrocketed as the Red Hot Chili Peppers took the stage. I was too shocked and angry to go back upstairs to Charles, so I just stood at the back of the hall for the next hour and a half. I've never had a better place for a rock concert in my life, and I've never heard so little music. My mind was focused only on Beth and Huntington, her betrayal, her lies, and my pain and rage. When the last encore ended, I looked to see which exit they were heading towards. Then I ran down the stairs in front of them and took a seat in the hall. I was going to say a few strong words to Beth's face before I went home to pack my things. I was angry and devastated, but determined to remain cool and calm in front of her. But my plans completely failed. Several teenagers noticed Madonna and her husband in the hallway and started screaming and running towards her. Within seconds, there was a stampede, and 200 excited, screaming fans blocked my path to Beth and Huntington, who were already walking out the door. I desperately screamed, "Beth, Beth, it's me," as loudly as possible, but they didn't hear me. In desperation, I pushed through the crowd towards the street. They stood at the curb, ready to get into the open door of a large white limousine, already out of earshot. Pulling out my phone again, I took 4 pictures of him helping her into the limo, holding her hand. Before I could get close, the limousine pulled out into traffic. Standing on the sidewalk, I dialed Beth's phone number. After 3 rings, I heard her voice. "Hello, dear." She sounded worried and a little strange, perhaps drunk. "Beth, it's me," I shouted. "I'm outside at Madison Square Garden. What the hell are you doing with?" About halfway through my question, I heard the line go dead. Furious, I called again. The phone rang 5 times, then voicemail came on. Cursing everything in the world, I hung up, waited 30 seconds, and tried again. This time, the phone went straight to voicemail. She fucking turned it off. I was standing on the sidewalk among thousands of people leaving Madison Square Garden, each going in their own direction. I was shaking with rage. I had no idea why Beth was attracted to this bastard, or even that there were any problems in our marriage. Seeing her with him was the most unpleasant shock of my life. I realized I had to call Charles, so I reluctantly dialed his number. I got to his voicemail, so I just said, "It's me." I tried to meet them after the concert, but I couldn't get through the crowd. I saw them leave in his limousine, that freak. I head home to pack my things and leave. I'll call you tomorrow. I hung up, belatedly realizing that I had never thanked him for the ticket. I hoped he would understand. Too furious to take the subway or sit in a taxi, I walked to our apartment on 77th Street, between Lexington and 3rd Avenue. It's a small studio apartment, but in a great area of the Upper East Side, and with our salaries, mine as an accountant at Cheney Magnuson and Beth's more impressive one at her swanky international investment firm, we could afford it, with enough to go out to dinner, sometimes in restaurants, and even go on vacation. I struggled all the way home, trying to understand why Beth allowed herself to be seduced by this freak. It must have been a seduction, didn't it? How could she be attracted to this smooth-talking, polished, hypocritical representative of old New York money? But even if it was Huntington, what the hell was she doing, giving into it? Does she not love me anymore? Didn't we have a great marriage? I was absolutely sure of this, and I knew one more thing. No way, I was not going to put up with this crap from her. When I got home, I found Beth's outfit that she had worn to work that morning thrown on the bed. She must have come home, put on her white dress, and ran out of the house with Huntington. I spent about 20 minutes packing a suitcase with a week's worth of clothes for work, as well as toiletries and a couple of framed photos of my family. The ones with Beth and me at our wedding, with friends in Central Park, with her family at Christmas I left on the bookshelf, although it took great effort not to smash them on the floor. I checked the answering machine, no calls from Beth or anyone else. I then called the Vanderbilt IMCA on East 47th Street and made a reservation for the week. I'd stayed there once before when I was in Philadelphia for a couple of days for interviews, and I knew it was clean and probably the cheapest place I could find in the city. I told them that I would arrive very late, and they gave me the phone number of the night receptionist. I then downloaded the photos from my phone to our computer and looked at them. Several of the 10 were too distant or blurry to show anything significant, but 6 of them were quite incriminating. 2 were from the audience and 4 when they got into the limousine, and each of them showed a degree of intimacy that was absolutely unacceptable for a happily married woman and her boss, who, by the way, was engaged to an internationally famous model. I printed 2 copies of each of the 6 photographs, placing one set in a suitcase and laying out the others on the oak table in our kitchen. Let him choke on them, bitch. The final touch. An answering machine. I erased the greeting and wrote a new one. This is Beth Davenport's apartment. Leave a message after the signal. Jake Carvalho no longer lives here. You can contact him by mobile phone, and left his number. Then I walked out the door. When I got outside, I checked my phone to see the time, 12:40. I had planned to just head downtown to the Y, but the night was warm. Without planning this, I crossed the street and sat on the steps of one of the brownstones that had a good view of our house. I didn't know how long I'd be sitting there, but I was curious to know when Beth would come home. Was she really going to stay all night with this bastard? After my rage had subsided a little, I began to think about Beth and me. I thought for a long time, but could not find a single explanation for what I saw at the concert, not a single sign that there were problems in our relationship, or that she might be infatuated with her boss. Beth and I had lived in New York for 3 years, the happiest years of my life. We got married the summer right after I graduated from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Beth graduated a year early, but stayed for a 5th year to get her master's degree in international banking and be with me. We were considered a rather unusual couple, as everyone around said, although it didn't seem that way to us. Beth was from an aristocratic Philadelphia family, Elizabeth Marshall Davenport, the Davenports of Lower Merion, on the conservative Main Line. Her family joked that their ancestors had come north to Massachusetts to meet the Pilgrims when they landed there in 1620. Beth was an official member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, as were her mother and both grandmothers. Her father Walter was the chief operating officer at Mellon Bank, and their family owned money that could be compared to the GDP of Costa Rica. I was Joaquim Francisco Carvalho, the eldest son of first-generation immigrants from Portugal. My parents raised me in Paterson, New Jersey, where my father worked as a shoemaker and my mother worked at a dry cleaner. Our family had enough money to own a small two-room house. I shared a room with my brother James and an old Ford Taurus with about 220,000 miles on it. I was a year older than Beth, but we entered Wharton at the same time. Even with the scholarship I was offered, I had to take a year off after school to earn money. I helped my uncle at construction during the day and delivered pizza around Hawthorne and Fair Lawn in the evening. After that year, I couldn't even look at pizza for a while, much less eat it, but I managed to save over $35,000 to pay for my education. Beth was not only beautiful, smart, and funny, but she was also the most independent woman I have ever met. I was convinced of this the first time I saw her. We both walked towards Huntsman Hall, which has two entrance doors. I saw a really cute girl walking a few steps ahead of me, and I hurried to open the door for her. "Thank you," she said, giving me a knowing smile. Apparently, she was already used to this, because she was so beautiful. She then quickly walked to the second door and opened it for me. I could only laugh and thank her as I walked inside in front of her. Before I had time to say a word, she had already turned away, still smiling, and headed down the corridor. 2 weeks later, she burst into the classroom right before our big finance lecture, and the only empty seat was next to me. This time I had a whole couple of minutes to think of what to say, and I didn't even spend a minute listening to the lecture. When the professor finished and we started collecting our notebooks, I smiled at her and said, "If you open the door for me, I'll buy you coffee." For a moment she just looked at me, stone-faced, and I thought I had screwed up. Then she smiled and said, "It's agreed, but I'll buy a cupcake and you'll open the door for me when we're done." We dated until the end of the first year, and by May I realized that everything was serious, at least for me. I had several girlfriends, and even seemed to be in love with one of them, but what I felt for Beth surpassed anything I felt in that relationship. I loved everything about her. Making love to her was wonderful, as I found out after several months of dating. But it was also wonderful to hold her hand and walk down Spruce Street or sit at the table listening to her tell me about Robinson Crusoe, her family's Labrador, who once almost caught a squirrel, or studying while sitting next to Van Pelt in the library, furtively watching her over the top of her book as she frowned and bit her lip in concentration. I had to take another year off to go back to Paterson and earn some money for school, and I was afraid that this might end our relationship. Beth and I talked for a long time, and I said that I didn't think it was fair to ask her to remain faithful to me. To my surprise, she burst into tears. "It's too late for that, Jake. If you want to get rid of me, you're too late. I love you." This led to comforting hugs and kisses. And while I was at home working in construction and delivering pizza, we constantly talked on the phone, saw each other every couple of months, and somehow managed to get through this difficult year. Beth and I were inseparable after that. During her last year of study, she lived in the same house, which caused some complaints from her parents, but we knew that we would get married after graduation. The wedding was something. Beth's parents did everything they could to impress all their mainline neighbors. There were 250 guests, incredible food, 8 bridesmaids and groomsmen, a band from the Philadelphia Orchestra, you get the idea, plus a whole weekend of rehearsals, picnics, pool parties. For my parents, who had only left New Jersey 3 times in their lives, this was quite daunting. But they had already had several meetings with Beth, and they fell in love with her. Better yet, she truly adored them both, and I was never more proud of her than when I watched her throughout the wedding weekend, trying to do everything she could to make my parents feel comfortable. She introduced them to all her favorite aunts and uncles, proudly told everyone about them, and tried to make them feel as important as possible. I have never felt so confident that I married the perfect woman. Her independence and desire for self-sufficiency showed in the little things. One day I walked into the kitchen and saw her sitting on an unstable chair, trying to get a glass from the top shelf. Beth is only 5 feet 2 inches tall. Why didn't you call me, darling? Come on, I'll get it. I'm 6 feet 1 in. No way, Jake. I'm already here and I can get it. I wanted to say that I would be glad to help, but the look in her eyes stopped me. Instead, I watched in horror, preparing to catch her if she fell. Of course, she didn't fall, and when she stood back up on the floor, she gave me a smug smile. I know you like to do things for me, darling, but I can really handle a lot of them myself, even if I'm just a little shrimp. Yes, I said, the spiciest shrimp I've ever tasted. She stuck her tongue out at me. Sitting on the brownstone steps on a warm evening, I couldn't find a single thing related to Beth or our marriage that could explain what I saw at the concert. We were both happy with our jobs, our lives, and as far as I knew each other. Beth mentioned Barton occasionally, but no more than a man would talk about his boss. Sometimes she admired his manners and ease in communicating with people. On other occasions, she joked about his aristocratic accent or the way he seduced wealthy old ladies. She thought he was a little phony, but he ran the office well and treated his employees fairly, and she appreciated that. He also had a beautiful and famous fiancée, model Elena Romanovskaya. Therefore, it never even occurred to me to consider him as a threat. There was one strange incident on a Saturday afternoon about 4 months ago at the end of March. The night before I went to the Knicks game with Charles because Beth had to go to a big office party where the couple wasn't invited. After a few beers with Charles, I returned home quite late and Beth was already asleep. The next day, she slept until 2:30 in the afternoon, went to take a long shower, and then came out in her white terry robe and climbed into my lap, snuggling as close as possible. She looked worried. You love me, don't you? Do you really love me? Not a bit. I was just about to leave you. Why are you asking? She ignored my awkward joke and said, This is nonsense, something stupid at work that I need to think about. I just wanted to make sure you still love me, Jake. I looked her seriously in the eyes and said, More than ever, Beth, more than you can imagine. After a pause, I added, What's the problem at work? Why don't you tell me about it? She sighed. No, not yet. I need to think it over myself first. Okay, Miss Independence, but can't I at least serve as a sounding board for you? She kissed me and said, Thank you, honey. I need to think about it for a while, and when I'm ready, we'll talk, okay? I realized that I wouldn't get any further with this, so I left the conversation. Beth remained a little quiet for a couple more days, but by Wednesday or Thursday, she was back to her usual cheerful self, and I never asked her again what the problem was or how she solved it. Now, sitting in the dark with my phone reading almost 3 a.m., I wondered if that Saturday was a clue I should have understood better, because it was the only thing I could think of that could even remotely explain how the love of my life could allow another man to be intimate in a public place, her boss, and how she could leave with him in his limousine, probably to spend the night in his luxurious apartment. I was puzzled and incredibly hurt. And then, suddenly, I lost my patience. Beth didn't come home, and I no longer cared when she came back or with whom. She could show up at 10 a.m. with the entire New York Giants offensive line, and I wouldn't give a damn. I checked my phone, 3:16 a.m. I grabbed my suitcase and headed down 77th Street to Lexington, where I hoped to find a taxi to the Y. Only when I reached the corner did I turn around to look at our house. The taxi just pulled up and 2 people got out, one of whom was in a white dress. It definitely had to be Beth. I couldn't see who the other person was, couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. I was briefly tempted to go back and take a closer look, but they would have already entered the building before I could get close enough. Screw it, I said to myself, and turned onto Lexington Avenue. I spent the next week as you'd expect, angry, hurt, confused, and determined not to talk to Beth or anyone she knew, and almost lasted until Thursday evening. I left my phone off, turning it on a couple of times a day to listen to messages. The first message from Beth came only around 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. There was panic in her voice, but I didn't even hear a few words. She called 6 more times during the day, and I deleted all the messages without listening. There was also a message from Charles asking for news. I met him for lunch and told him everything that happened. He'd known Beth almost as long as I had. We'd all been friends since Wharton, and he was absolutely flabbergasted. This is so unlike her, dude. I know we both saw it, so I can't say it didn't happen, but it doesn't make sense at all. I came to the same conclusion. Tell me, have you noticed any signs of problems between us? Signs that Beth is bored or angry? Is there anything I might have unknowingly done that would make her angry? Not one, I swear. You two are so inseparable that sometimes it makes me cringe. He smiled and then suddenly became serious. Sorry, Jake, he said seriously. This is no time for jokes. It's okay, you're my only good friend now. I'll have to put up with you. I smiled at him. We were old friends, and I trusted him completely. How I trusted Beth until about 24 hours ago. The thought of this made my face tighten into an angry grimace. On Sunday, I spent the whole day walking, sitting in the park and thinking. I didn't get anywhere. I had no idea how my wonderful marriage could go downhill so quickly, and I knew nothing about it. Beth called 21 more times, leaving 8 messages, all of which I deleted. I listened to one of them out of curiosity. She was no longer crying or panicking, but she sounded deeply worried. Please, dear, call me back. Everything is not what you think, and I'm going crazy. Please let me talk to. I deleted the message. That was enough. I just kept my head down, worked hard, talked to Charles a couple of times, and worried. One moment I was so angry I couldn't think clearly, the next I was hurt, then just confused. But I have always been determined. What Beth did killed our marriage, and I wasn't going to play games about it. Let her suffer for a week or two. Then I'll go home and tell her it's over. My plans changed when I received a call from Madeline on Thursday afternoon. Along with Charles, Madeline was part of a large group of Wharton graduates who came to New York for work. Beth and I knew her well during our studies. She was always a little crazier than us, a real party girl. But that didn't stop her from graduating in the top 2% of our class, and she was now well on her way to becoming a partner at one of the biggest firms on Wall Street. Jake, thank God I found you. This is Madeline. Hey, Mad, what's wrong? I need to see you tonight. It's urgent. Shall we have a drink after work? Of course I. Great. Meet me in Sorrentino at 6:30. And she hung up. I figured it was probably something to do with Beth. I have no doubt that Madeline was sent as an emissary to deliver some bullshit apology since I wasn't answering my wife's calls. But I was wrong. As soon as the drinks appeared on the table, Madeline leaned forward and looked at me carefully. Jake, listen, I saw Beth last Friday night, and she didn't sleep with that bastard boss. Let me tell you a story, okay? Don't interrupt. When I'm done, you can ask whatever you want. I couldn't help but smile a little at her intensity. Madeline has always been like this. Okay, Mad, I'm listening. I was out clubbing that night, she smiled at me for a moment, and I was just leaving Jejun when I noticed Beth walking out ahead of me. It was about 5 minutes past 3 in the morning. She was with Barton Huntington. I recognized him immediately from all these photographs I had seen of him and his supermodel. He held her hand and seemed to be heading towards a large white limousine. I shouted, Beth, and ran up to her. She turned, freeing herself from his embrace, and almost fell. There was a stupid smile on her face, and I immediately realized that she was not in adequate condition. She exclaimed, Hi, Mad, in a strange childish voice, and literally fell into my arms. She hugged me and didn't let me go at first. Are you having a good evening? Barton and I are having a great evening, aren't we, Barton? Her eyes could barely focus, and I realized it wasn't just the alcohol. I've seen Beth drunk a couple of times. It seemed like she had taken something and possibly mixed it with alcohol. I turned to Huntington, and he was just standing there with a disappointed grin on his face, as if his candy had been taken away from him. I turned back to Beth and said, "What are you doing here? Where's Jake?" And confusion appeared on her face. She said, "I don't know, I don't remember exactly. Barton, where's Jake?" He didn't even answer her. He just took her hand and tried to pull her out of my arms, saying, "Come on, Beth, it's time to go." Well, I wasn't going to let him get away with that crap that easily. It was obvious what was going on, so I held her back and said, "Beth, you are not going home with him. I'll call us a taxi." And I looked straight at Huntington. My face must have made it clear that he had no chance that night. He just looked at me, looking a little disappointed and angry. Then he turned on his heel, climbed into the limousine, and it drove away. I turned to Beth again and said, "What were you doing with him, and why are you here without Jake?" She just looked at me with glassy eyes, trying to remember. "I know we were at the Chili Peppers concert, and then Barton took me to this club. He was going to introduce me to them, but I don't remember the rest. Jake was supposed to be there too. I don't think I saw him." She was so out of it, Jake. "I caught a taxi and took her back to your apartment. She happily chatted with me about the concert the whole way. I took the key out of her purse and dragged her inside, straight to the bedroom. I took her clothes off and put her to bed. She was still talking about how cute John Frucient was and how Flea signed the napkin she had in her purse. Finally, I managed to calm her down, and after a couple of minutes, she was fast asleep. On the way out, I went into the kitchen to drink water and saw those photos that you must have left. Did you go to the concert at Madison Square Garden?" I nodded. "Yes, Charles got hold of 2 tickets at the last minute. I saw her with Huntington during the concert and tried to catch up with her after, but the crowd pushed me back. All I could do was take a few pictures with my cell phone. Then I tried to call her, but she fucking hung up and turned off the phone." Madeline leaned towards me, tense as always, and took my hands. "Listen, I'm your friend and Beth's friend. I love you both, and I don't want your marriage to fail because her boss is a fucking predator. I don't know what happened that night, but I can tell Beth didn't sleep with Barton or anyone else. Her underwear was clean and dry when I took it off, and there is no chance that she took it herself. I'll bet a year's salary that Barton slipped something into her drink." I sat back, thinking. I knew Madeline was one of Beth's friends, but I didn't think she would go so far as to make up such a story. And Beth did look a little drunk at Madison Square Garden, and I actually saw a taxi outside our house at 3:15 that night, with a woman in a white dress and someone else. "Jake, will you talk to her, please? She's going crazy. You know she loves you, don't you, you big idiot?" My raised eyebrows made her smile, and she slightly let go of me. "It must have been terrible, but it's really not what you thought, I promise you. Now will you call her, before she drives me crazy too?" I laughed and said, "Okay, Mad. I don't want you to be even crazier than you already are. I'll call her and tell her I'll come home to talk." "Talk? How about we just go home?" I shook my head. "I'm not ready for this yet. I hope you're right that the bastard didn't get his way. Looks like he didn't get it last Friday, but I still have a lot of questions that need answers. Jake, trust me. I've known Beth for almost 8 years. She loves you as much as she can. She didn't cheat on you." "I hope you're right, Mad. I really do. And I'll go talk to her. But," she smiled, "but you still have doubts, understandable. Just let her explain everything, okay?" Okay, I give up." I raised my hands in mock surrender. "Can we go have dinner now?" Out of stubbornness or residual anger, I didn't call Beth right away. I waited until mid-morning Friday and left a message on my answering machine saying I'd come over Saturday at noon to talk. It gave me another day to think about Madeline's story, digest it all, and try to figure out what I thought about it. Eventually, I realized that I didn't know how I felt. There is too much left unanswered. When I walked into the apartment on Saturday, Beth was smart enough not to try to throw herself around my neck. She waited in the living room as I closed the door behind me, looking nervous and incredibly beautiful. She combed her hair, put on some makeup, and put on shorts and a t-shirt that I adored. It said Rome and featured 4 pictures of the Colosseum in different colors. I bought it for her on our honeymoon in Italy. "Hi, Beth," I said seriously. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. "Hi, Jake," she replied quietly. "I'm so glad you're back." "Just talk," I said. "For now, only this. Madeline told me what she saw that night and convinced me to listen to what you had to say." I sat down on the sofa. "So tell me I'm listening." She pulled a chair in front of me, then sat down so she could look me straight in the eyes. "First of all, darling, you need to know how much I love you. I would never." "Stop, Beth." She looked at me with shock. "I'm not here to listen to your protestations of love and devotion, okay?" I said coldly. "Just tell me what happened. Tell me how my faithful and loving wife, who had to work late because of an important proposal for Tokyo, ends up at a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert with her boss, allowing him too much, and then leaving with him in a limousine and returning home only in the middle of the night." By the end of these words, my voice turned into an angry cry. I stopped and looked at Beth. She was still looking into my eyes, but I noticed how she was trembling. "Okay, Jake, the whole truth." She took a deep breath, looked down for a moment, and then looked back at me and began to speak. "First, I will tell you everything in general terms, and then the details. Barton planned everything that evening to get me into bed, including drugging me with something. And I think he would probably have achieved his goal if we had not accidentally met Madeline. She took me from him and brought me home. Oh, Jake, I'm so sorry." Suddenly, she began to cry, loudly, hiding her face in her hands. "I didn't do anything." I sat there, frozen, cold, watching her. I didn't feel the slightest desire to hug her or console her. I felt only anger and nausea at the thought of how my beautiful wife could have fallen under the influence of a scoundrel. And although Madeline seemed to have prevented it by pure chance, it didn't do much to ease my feelings. After a few minutes, she calmed down and finally wiped her eyes with a handkerchief and looked at me. I still sat motionless, frozen, looking at her coldly. "You won't say anything," I shook my head. "Okay, then, details." "I won't hide anything, dear. I'll tell you everything. Or at least everything I remember." Her face showed anger for a moment. The whole story with the big offer for Tokyo was complete nonsense, as I realized later. Barton made it seem like Diana and I and 4 others would have to work until midnight, but at about 6 p.m. he told everyone except me that it was okay to go away for the weekend. He said that the proposal was almost ready, and he just needed me to double-check a few key paragraphs of the translation. But first, he said, we need to drink to do our good work. He went into his office and returned with a tray on which there were 7 glasses of champagne. He handed them out to everyone, and I realized later that he had very carefully chosen one of them for me. She looked at me angrily. "This bastard, everything was a setup." Anyway, we had a drink, everyone else left, and I started checking the paragraphs Barton wanted me to look at. By the time I finished, I felt relaxed and a little weird. When I woke up the next day, I immediately realized that he had drugged me. But at that moment, I didn't realize what it was. I just felt that I was very calm and at ease. I thought it was probably from the champagne. Then Barton said he had 2 tickets to the Chili Peppers concert at Madison Square Garden and suggested they go together. I asked him, "What about Jake?" and went to call you. But he stopped me, said he already called and talked to you, and you said you were going to the movies with a friend and would meet me later at home. Now I understand what nonsense that was, Jake. But then, in that state, it seemed quite logical. And you know how much I adore the Chili Peppers. Everything seemed natural. So Barton quickly took me downstairs and put me in the limousine. We returned home, and he waited for me to change. He said I should wear something really nice, and like a fool, I just did as he said and put on this pretty white dress. In the limousine on the way to the concert, we drank champagne again, and he must have added more to my glass, because by the time the concert started I was already in 7th heaven. Everything was just colors and sound. I felt relaxed but full of energy, and you know how it happens, everyone around me seemed to be friends. I felt a kinship with everyone in the crowd. When I saw the photos you took, I was shocked because I don't remember this at all. But I can believe it happened. I was so relaxed. Everything seemed wonderful. Everything he said seemed funny. I just loved the concert, and of course I didn't see you. I'm ashamed to admit, but I was too nailed to even think about you. Barton's false explanation completely convinced me that you were out there somewhere, and everything was fine. And then at the end of the show, he looked at me and said, "How about we go to the after party at Jejun, and I'll introduce you to the band?" I was incredibly excited, so of course I said yes. Meet the Chili Peppers? Wow. She stopped for a moment and looked at me. I recovered a lot of what I told the next day, Jake with the help of Madeline. Everything passed me by that night, thanks to Barton. So, when we had just gotten into the limousine, the bell rang, and it was you. I started to say hi, but Barton just grabbed the phone, said he would sort it out, and hung up. The phone rang again, and I said, "It must be Jake," a little scared, but he just shook his head and said, "It's okay, Jake is fine," and didn't answer. And then he turned off the phone and put it in my purse. Jake, it all seemed reasonable at the time. She looked at me with concern. "I know it must have been terrible for you. I've looked at those photos a million times, and I can't even imagine how angry you were. But I swear to you, I was so out of my mind that I didn't even realize that I was doing anything wrong." I said, "Keep going, Beth." I didn't trust myself to say anything else at that moment. Well, we got to Jejun, and it was loud and wild with the lights flashing and everything. Barton kept pouring me champagne, and I was hot and thirsty, so I kept drinking it. And then the Chili Peppers came into the club, and he really introduced me to them. I think he must know them through Elena, you know? And I got Flea's autograph on a napkin, shook hands with everyone, and their PR guy took a couple of pictures of me with them. And then suddenly Barton and I were outside the club again, heading towards the limousine. I'm sure this bastard was going to take me to his place and have sex, and I just didn't understand what was going on. Her eyes were cold and angry. Thank God we stumbled upon Madeline by chance. I was so glad to see her, not because I knew what Barton was up to, but simply because I love Mad. And she probably told him off and took me home in a taxi. I vaguely remember the taxi ride and chatting with Madeline about the concert all the way home. She took the key from my purse and dragged me inside, straight to the bedroom. She took my clothes off and put me to bed while I was still talking about how cute John Frusciant was and how Flea signed the napkin I had in my purse. Finally, she put me to bed, and within a few minutes, I was fast asleep. I slept until 2:30 the next day, and when I woke up, I had a terrible hangover and couldn't understand anything. I sat up on the bed and tried to figure out what happened and why you weren't there, but I could only remember fragments of last night. So I went to the kitchen for coffee, being sure that you had already brewed it. But the coffee pot was empty, and then I turned around and saw the photographs. She smiled bitterly at me. I screamed, Jake, literally screamed, and I backed away from them as if they were snakes sitting right on the table. And then I slowly returned to the room, sat down, and began to look at them, one by one. And gradually, I began to recall the events in my memory. And the more I remembered, the worse it became. And then I just started crying. I sat here and cried for an hour, walked around the apartment, sobbing, and thought about Barton, and I wanted to take a gun and shoot him right in the head. But most of all, I thought about you and how you must feel. And finally, I started calling you, leaving messages over and over again. But you didn't answer or call back, and I became more and more scared. So I called Charles, Brian, and every mutual friend I could think of, but no one knew where you were. Charles said you two saw us at the concert, but I already knew that. On Monday, I called Madeline and begged her to come to me, and we talked for 3 hours. She told me everything she saw that night and helped me remember the rest. I showed her the photos and everything. And then on Wednesday, I asked her to please go see you because you weren't talking to me, and I didn't know where you were, and... Tears began to flow again, and she fell silent. I watched her, and the cold that I felt began to gradually disappear. My wife sat in front of me, unhappy and frightened. I stood up and gently took her hand, pulling her back into my lap as I sat back down on the couch. She threw her arms around my neck and sobbed, burying her face in my shirt, and I stroked her until she gradually calmed down. Finally, she looked up at me and asked in a quiet voice, "Are we okay now?" I smiled and said, "We'll be fine." I kissed her and she hugged me even tighter, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Then we kissed again. Then she said, "Maybe we." I nodded and she jumped up from my lap, grabbing my hand and pulling me into the bedroom. When I woke up, the clock showed 4:45. Beth was still sleeping peacefully next to me, the sheets rising and falling in rhythm with her steady breathing. I lay on my side and looked at her, as I often liked to do, admiring her beauty and what she meant to me. I hated that bastard Huntington for what he tried to do to her, and thoughts of how to take revenge on him were mixed with feelings of warmth and affection for Beth. Am I to blame for what happened? I didn't see how I could do it if everything really was as she described. She had worked for this man for 3 years, and, as far as I knew, had no reason not to trust him. I still wondered why a man who was engaged to one of the most beautiful and sexy models on the planet would go through so much effort to seduce someone else. Beth was beautiful, but she couldn't compare to Elena. When Beth opened her eyes and saw me smiling at her, she whispered, "Oh, thank God," and rolled over to hug me, pressing herself against my body. "I was so afraid that I dreamed it, that you didn't actually come back to me." "I'm here," I said and kissed her. We sat at the table in shorts and t-shirts, shared a frozen pizza and a Greek salad we had whipped up, drank a couple bottles of Corona, and held hands. None of us wanted to go out or even order food. "What are you going to do with work, Beth? You can't work with this bastard anymore. What should I do now so as not to break into his office and beat his brains out?" She looked up at me. Her smile disappeared, replaced by a serious, cautious expression that I couldn't understand. "It's already decided. On Monday morning, I walked into his office and told his secretary, Suzanne Dooley, that I was resigning and that I would be filing a harassment report against him with Ferris and Roberts. And then I walked out before he could stop me or even say a word. You should have seen the look on Suzanne's face. I immediately returned to my office. Diana helped me pack all my things into a large cardboard box, and I returned home. I spent the afternoon writing down everything that happened on Friday in as much detail as possible, and then sent it by certified mail to Arnold Rappaport, head of human resources at Ferris. So on Tuesday, I updated my resume and sent it out, and by Friday, I had 3 interviews scheduled for that week. Not bad, Jake, considering I've been worried about you all this time. Beth seemed calm, but I felt much less confident in the situation. "Do you really think it's going to be that easy, honey? I mean, you know and I know what he did, but wouldn't it just be a matter of word against word?" "He doesn't stand a chance, Jake. I have Diana and other employees who will confirm that the project's deadline on Friday was fake, and that he got the champagne and sent everyone but me home for the weekend. And we have your photographs, and Madeline can tell you what she saw." She looked into my eyes. "Trust me, darling. Everything is under control. You don't have to worry." I was still far from sure. "Beth, I don't want to be pessimistic, but you've only been at Ferris for a couple of years, and Huntington is a big VP with international stature." As I stood up and started putting away the dishes, it dawned on me. Has he ever done anything like this before? Have you heard any stories about him and other women? Or maybe he's hit on you before? I turned to her and froze. She blushed deeply and looked away, lowering it to the table. Her calm expression gave way to pain and embarrassment. "Damn it, Beth," I said. "This isn't the first time. He did something like this before, and you didn't tell me about it." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Yes, once. I was so upset, but I really felt like I had to handle it myself. I'm not a child anymore, that's what I told myself. I'm a businesswoman who can take care of herself. And I did it, Jake. It's been a few months, and everything was fine until that Friday happened." "Damn, Beth." I was angry again. almost as angry as I had been all that week. This person harassed you or propositioned you for something, and you didn't even bother to tell your husband about it. Don't you trust me? Is our relationship unimportant to you? No, honey, it's not that. It's just, I didn't want to run to you or Dad or anyone else. I, I needed to feel like I could handle it on my own, that's all. I started pacing around the kitchen, thinking about everything. I tried to calm down. Okay, I said, partly to Beth and partly to myself. I'm not going to explode. There's already enough drama for this week. I tried to smile. I continued to pace around the kitchen while she watched me anxiously. It wasn't as bad as last week, right? I mean, that other time. What did he do? Try to hit on you or offer you a promotion if you slept with him? I looked at her again and experienced another unpleasant shock. She looked completely terrified. No, Jake, it was worse. Worse, and you didn't tell me anything. Okay, tell me now. Long pause. I looked closely at Beth, and she looked at the floor. Beth, please don't be angry. Darling, you know how much I... Beth, speak. Another pause. Then finally she said, It's not what you think, I swear. She told me about what happened. What? And you didn't consider it necessary to mention this. I'm your husband. Jake, I know it was stupid. I should have. I interrupted her. Damn right, that was stupid. Damn right, you should have told me. What am I to you? Some random acquaintance you just live with. Damn it, Beth, we're married. I should be the person you trust more than anything in the world. What the hell is wrong with you? I couldn't stand it. I felt like my head was going to explode. I need to get out. I need to get out of here now. Jake, please don't go. I'll be back, probably, but if I don't go out now, I'll destroy all the furniture in the apartment. Damn it, Beth, how could you? How could you not tell me? With these words, I flew out the door, taking only my wallet and phone. Behind me, I heard her tearful voice begging me to stay, but I ignored it. Just like last Friday night, I was too angry to do anything but walk. Fast. With rage. God help that old lady who gets in my way, I thought to myself. This time I headed straight west on 77th Street towards 5th Avenue and Central Park, ignoring the joyful faces of families and young couples enjoying the beautiful evening. When I got out onto Central Park West, I stopped and called Charles. Hello, it's me. Are you busy right now? Okay, can I come over to your place and we'll have a couple of beers? I think I'll need no less. Yes, Beth again, and it's just incredible. She must be crazy. Yes, I'm a couple of blocks from the subway on the west side. I'll be with you in about half an hour. We sat in a booth at Clancy's, not far from Charles's apartment in the village, and began drinking a pitcher of Sam Adams. I told him the whole story that night at the Chili Peppers concert, Beth's story of what happened, our reconciliation, and then this surreal conversation when she admitted that this had happened before. Charles just sat there and looked at me, shaking his head. Damn, buddy, you always liked how independent Beth is. I think she's gone too far this time. I looked at him angrily. Do you think? I realized that I was almost screaming, and people began to turn in our direction. I lowered my voice. I don't know what exactly happened. I was too angry to stay and listen to the whole story. But no matter how it happened, she never said a single damn word to me about it. She even continued to work for this guy. How can I trust her after this? She says she loves me, and I actually believe her. Do you know how stupid she is? But some other guy will get intimate with her, God knows how, and it's not worth mentioning to me. After all, I'm just her husband. I stopped when I saw the look on Charles' face and laughed. The thought of sex with a woman was completely unpleasant to him, and his expression clearly showed this. Sorry, buddy, I said. I forgot that I could offend your delicate feelings. He grinned. Not your fault, Jake, but I'd rather you tell me a good story about sex with a man. I so love hearing stories about good men. I laughed again. How this guy could make me feel better when I was so angry was a mystery, but I was grateful to my friend. Well, I need to get back to that creep Huntington, I said. How about we tie him up and you can have sex with him? He laughed. Oh no, he's too old for me, and it looks too much like a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. You know me, I like young and athletic, all those muscles. Charles licked his lips again, looking at me with a sly smile, and I laughed again. He was my crazy straight friend, doing everything he could to make me feel better, and I was grateful to him for that. When I returned to the apartment, it was almost 1 in the morning and the lights were off. I was a little drunk and knew it wouldn't do any good to confront Beth at such a late hour, especially since she seemed to be already asleep. I lay down on the sofa, my mind going over and over what happened, unable to come to any decision. Beth works for a sexual predator, and she didn't feel the need to tell me about it. She decided she could handle it on her own and still works for him. Was my smart, talented, beautiful wife actually the stupidest woman in the world? About this thought, I fell asleep. When I woke up on Sunday morning, the first thing I smelled was the coffee. Then I felt a throbbing pain in my head and heard her gentle voice softly saying, "Honey, are you awake?" She was in her terry robe, fresh from the shower. Her hair was wet and shiny. Her face was clear, but with dark circles under her eyes. She must have had a rough night too. But she still looked amazing. I was tempted by the thought of hugging her and holding her close, but then I remembered how angry I was with her. So I frowned and simply said, "Can I have a cup of coffee?" She silently brought it to me and sat down on the other end of the sofa, looking at me seriously. I waited without much enthusiasm for what was about to happen. I drank my coffee in silence, enduring the pain in my head and feeling my rage growing. When I finished drinking, I looked at Beth and said, "Breakfast first, then we'll talk. Then we'll see if there's anything that can still be saved here." She looked at me with horror, but did not answer. I think Beth knew me well enough to recognize when I was deliberately exaggerating my rage, or at least she hoped I was exaggerating. Then she said, "Go take a shower, honey, and I'll make us bacon and eggs." Without saying a word, I headed to the bathroom. 40 minutes later, I was clean, full from breakfast, and feeling much more human, although I didn't show it to Beth. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table with cups of coffee in our hands. "Okay, my dear wife," I began in a sarcastic tone. "Where did we stop? Oh yes, Barton Huntington, I remember correctly." She looked hurt, but only said, "Yes, Jake. Not because I wanted it, believe me, but yes. And if you let me tell you the whole story, I will. I know I've been the biggest fool in the world, but I hope you'll at least try to understand me before you." She paused for a moment and then continued, "Before you decide you don't want me in your life anymore." "Okay, I'm listening." It was a Friday night in March. The party was just for Ferris and Robert's employees, no spouses, so you went with Charles to a Knicks game. The entire time I worked there, Barton never did anything inappropriate. I knew he found me attractive. That's not hard to tell in a man, but he didn't flirt, touch me inappropriately, or do anything to make me wary. And damn it, he was engaged to Elena Romanovskaya. Why would he be interested in me? But that evening he was often at my side, joining various groups in which I spoke, and on at least 2 occasions, when I needed a refill, he offered to do it for me. And there were dances, and I danced with him a couple of times, but also with other people. Remember Ralph from our department and Alex, with several guys. Towards the end of the evening, I started to feel strange, not just drunk. I know how that feels, but like tired and unsteady. Barton noticed this and quietly asked if I was okay. Would I like to lie down for a few minutes? This seemed like a good idea, so he took me to the elevator, lifted me into his office, and helped me lie down on the couch. I felt relaxed and sleepy, not drunk, but definitely lethargic. Barton must have locked the door and then sat down on the sofa next to me and quietly talked to me about God knows what. My eyes were closing, and he told me to just close them, just relax. And it was nice, Jake. She looked at me with challenge and fear. I didn't know what he put in my drink, but it felt good, but I swear to God, I didn't even know it wasn't you. Then suddenly there was a knock on the door, and I heard Diana's voice asking if there was someone inside, and I opened my eyes and saw Barton standing over me with an erection sticking out of his pants. I think he thought he had achieved his goal and could go ahead and have sex with me. I was too stunned and dumbfounded to even scream. I just lay there. Then he came and opened the door, completely calm, and told Diana that I felt a little bad, and he allowed me to lie down in his office. She came in and the two of them helped me up, and he asked if she could walk me home. I don't know if she suspected anything other than that the door was closed. Anyway, she never asked me about it, and I never told her. I stared at her, trying to make sense of it all. "Okay," I said. "Let's say I believe everything you told me." "This is true," she exclaimed. "I swear to you in my life, every word is true." "Fine, but please explain to me then why I didn't hear anything about this, and why you continued to work for this asshole instead of quitting and filing a complaint against him. Damn it, Beth, what were you even thinking?" She looked at me almost desperately. "Remember that Saturday afternoon, the day after the party, when I got up very late, took a long shower, and then came in a robe, sat on your lap, and asked if you loved me?" I nodded, and she continued. "I felt terrible. Just terrible. I felt betrayed, angry, and incredibly guilty, even though I didn't think it was my fault. And I wanted to kill Barton." Her eyes sparkled. "I wanted to shoot him right in the head, that bastard. But I felt like I had to handle this myself, Jake. I couldn't let you or anyone else decide this for me. I was a grown woman, a businesswoman in a man's world, and I had to prove that I could handle this on my own. So I thought about it all weekend. On Monday morning, after you left for work, I stayed home and wrote him a letter about my resignation, in which I said that I was going to file a complaint against him with the Human Resources Department. Let's go, I'll show you this letter." She ran to the computer, searched through the files, and found the letter she needed. It was addressed to Barton Huntington and dated March 27th. "Dear Barton, in light of your disgraceful behavior last Friday at the party, I can no longer work for you. I hereby announce my resignation, effective immediately. You can rest assured that I will file a complaint with Ferris Roberts Human Resources and demand a full investigation. I have no doubt that your actions will lead, at a minimum, to your dismissal. Sincerely, Elizabeth Davenport." I read the letter, then looked up at her. "So what happened? Why didn't you give him the letter?" "I gave it, Jake. I walked into his office at about 10:30, placed the letter in front of him, said, 'I quit,' and went back to put my things away. 10 minutes later, Suzanne called my office, saying that Barton urgently wanted to see me. I refused, but 5 minutes later he came himself, standing in front of me. He apologized 10 times, said that he had never done anything like this before, that he was so amazed by my beauty at the party, and he realized that he had acted badly, abused my trust, and so on. And he asked what he needed to do to keep me working at Ferris. So I said I'd think about it and left for the day. I walked around New York, did a little shopping, and thought and thought. And all this time it didn't occur to you to talk to me?" I interrupted. "Yes, Jake, of course it came. Talk to you, or Diana, or someone else. But I wanted to deal with it myself. Maybe I was the biggest fool in the world, but then I was confident that I could cope. The next day I came with another letter, my list of conditions. I put it on his desk, and within 2 minutes he agreed with everyone." She went back to the computer and opened the second letter. March 28th. "Dear Barton, I will return to my position with your Ferris Roberts division and agree not to file a complaint with Human Resources regarding your assault on me last Friday under the following conditions. 1, you will provide me with a detailed written apology detailing everything that happened last Friday night at the party and in your office. 2, you agree to never again behave inappropriately towards me or other Ferris employees, not to make any indecent proposals, not to use alcohol or illegal substances for sexual encounters, not to offer promotions in exchange for sex, and not to threaten punishment for refusal. 3, you agree to treat me with respect as you would any other Ferris Roberts employee. for you agree that you and I will never be alone with each other again. Sincerely, Elizabeth Davenport. We returned to the table, and she continued. The next day, I had a detailed 3-page letter from him, which I kept locked in my desk. I sat down on a chair. Beth, this is just too shitty to believe. This person pumped you up, allowed him to be intimate with you. You were saved simply by luck so that he wouldn't use you, and you would continue to work for him. She blushed, but looked me straight in the eyes. I know it sounds like the stupidest decision in the world, but at the time I felt a huge victory. I got him to back down, I got his written confession, he behaved correctly in every moment, and I was able to continue doing the work I love. I felt so proud that I pulled it off. I laughed bitterly. Yes, well, for about 4 months. I won't say that it was the right decision. I know, she said, lowering her head. And I'm so sorry. I was just wrong, Jake. I was wrong that I didn't tell you. But I knew you would want to rush in there and hit him. You would never let me handle it on my own. She was right about it, and I knew it. Perhaps, Beth. But this is too big a secret to hide from me. If some secretary at Cheney Magnuson got me drunk and did the same to me, how would you feel? And if I hid this from you? Yes, I know, dear. I would hate it. I would want to kill you and her. I would go crazy. We sat in silence for several minutes. I was still angry, very angry, but I was beginning to understand her a little. What she did was fucking stupid, but I understood why she did it. Beth's independence was an important part of her personality. I had to respect that, even if it led her to make a big mistake. Finally, I broke the silence. Well, if you have his confession the first time, he is now completely screwed, he has nowhere to go. Can I see this letter? Now she looked truly terrible, almost sick. In a quiet voice, she said, I don't have one, Jake. It was locked in my desk, but when I put my things away on Monday, it wasn't there. He must have found it and stolen it over the weekend. Damn it, Beth, it's getting worse and worse every time. Do you even have a copy? She shook her head sadly. Another pause as I tried my best not to yell at her. Well, that concludes our conversation. She just sat at the table and cried, and I went out for a long walk again. When I returned, we seemed to ignore each other by mutual consent, and at dinner we only said, pass the salt, or the chicken is good, thank you, do you want more? After dinner, I sat down and watched the Yankees lose to Toronto, although I can't tell you anything about the game. Beth hid in the bedroom, and when I came to bed at 11:30, she was either already asleep or pretending to be. I left early for work the next morning without breakfast or a shower because I still wasn't ready to talk to Beth. But I called Madeline, and she agreed to meet me for a long lunch. She already knew half the story, and I trusted her opinion. I felt that at that moment I could not completely rely on my own. I was too angry. Madeline, as always, chose the most expensive French restaurant in the center for our meeting, Le Petit Trianon. God knows how she managed to get a table in such a short time. She listened to me while I told her the whole story, or rather the parts she didn't know. I watched her face as she sipped her martini, but she didn't show any emotion until I was done. Then she smiled Madeline's unique smile, combining empathy, sarcasm, and a predatory expression that I hoped was reserved for Barton Huntington. So, Jake, where are you now? The woman you love turns out to be just as stupid as the rest of us, or at least she was this time. No, it's not fair, far more stupid than most of us have ever been. So what are you going to do about it? She asked this question with challenge, but not without kindness. That's how Madeline was direct, didn't waste time on anything other than getting to the point. There are 2 questions, Mud, that are obvious. First, can Beth and I survive what she did? It's not just her stupidity, but also the fact that I feel betrayed. I would trust her with my life, but she didn't tell me a word about what happened to her. Well, Spirit Jake, don't you think she was incredibly ashamed and embarrassed about this? This happens to young girls at Penn at frat parties, not to a grown woman rising to the top of international business. Smell the coffee, she felt like a complete fool. She would tell you about a business mistake, like losing a client or something like that, without hesitation, and would seek your sympathy and support. But in this case, she was probably both ashamed and scared of how you would react, including, as she said, the fear that you would storm into Huntington's office and punch him in the face, that asshole. Yes, I said with a smile, I probably would. Well, as satisfying as that would be for you, it would be humiliating for her. You can understand that, of course. I nodded reluctantly. Yes, but that doesn't justify her hiding it from me. Agree, Beth was wrong, as she's already told you more than once, so what are you going to do about it? I sighed. You already asked me about this. Okay, first of all, I want to stay with her. I have never loved anyone as much as I love Beth, and no one can make me happy like she does. But damn it, she must understand that our relationship must change. We are partners, and if she hides things from me just because it's awkward and painful, then I'll leave. And next time I won't come back. I stared at Madeline as if she were to blame, while she calmly smiled back at me. Okay, Jake, this is a start, and I am 100% sure that Beth will agree to these terms. And truth be told, she'll be disgustingly remorseful and submissive for weeks, so make the most of it. With that, she rolled her eyes, making an, oh yeah, hot sex expression, and I burst out laughing. After a minute, she said, what's the second question? This one is also obvious. How the hell can we get revenge on that fucking Huntington? A magnificent, predatory glow returned to Madeline's eyes as she leaned forward. Well, I have a couple of ideas. We enjoyed discussing her and my ideas for some time. When it was time to say goodbye, she said, now listen, you have to remember this. Of course you're mad at Beth, and she really needs to make it up to her. But when it comes to taking action against Huntington, you must be full partners. She was the one who was abused, so the final decision about what to do should be hers. Yeah, I said a little defensively, but she'll damn well have to include me in her thinking this time. I agree, Madeline said immediately, and I know she will. Jake, she's not stupid despite what this episode makes her look like. And she really, really loves you. Madeline looked thoughtful for a moment as she said this. I realized that in the years that I knew her, there were many fleeting romances, several great one-night stands, but not a single man in her life for more than a couple of months. She must have been jealous of what Beth and I had. This thought made me think seriously and a little sad, but it also made me feel very happy. We finished our lunch and said goodbye on the sidewalk, and I had only taken a few steps when I turned and shouted, "Mud." She turned around and looked at me in bewilderment. Can I walk you to the office? I have a couple more questions, I said. Of course, Jake. Ask. We walked through the city, not paying much attention to the passers-by around us. Madeline, you are my friend, just like Beth's friend, right? Of course, Jake. Well, if you found out I was cheating on Beth, would you tell her? Madeline's eyes sparkled. Damn it, I would say, if only I hadn't torn you to pieces myself. I smiled at her. Fine. Then if you found out Beth was cheating on me, would you tell me? This question made her stop. She looked unsure for a moment. I'm not sure, Jake. Honestly, I think I probably would, but I'd think about it first. We continued walking. Thanks for your honesty, Mud. So, how do I know that she is not cheating on me now? How do I know she's not sleeping with that creep Huntington, and these complicated stories are just a way to keep me in the dark? Madeline laughed, apparently feeling relief from my question. It's easy, Jake. First of all, even though I might not have told you right away that Beth was cheating on you, which, by the way, would never happen, I would never lie to cover for her. The story of that Friday outside Jejun is true. And secondly, if Beth was cheating on you, why would she admit to what happened the first time Huntington drugged her? You didn't know anything about this, right? So why doesn't she just keep quiet about it? I thought about it while Madeline looked at me triumphantly. She was, of course, absolutely right. If Beth cheated on me with Huntington or anyone else, The last thing she would ever do is tell me the story of the infamous episode. Finally, I said, "Yes, you're right, Mud, and thank you, it helps." She took my hand and squeezed it tightly. We walked on in silence for a while, and then our conversation naturally turned to other topics. As I walked her to the office, I felt better than I had in the last couple of weeks. A week later, on a Tuesday morning, I walked past Huntington's secretary Suzanne, who gave me a smile and an up gesture, and walked into his office, closing the door behind me. He looked up with irritation, not recognizing me at first. "Who are you, and how did you get past my secretary?" "What happened, Barton? Don't you remember Beth's husband? From what I've heard, you're showing quite a lot of interest in her." I saw realization dawn on his face. He reached for the phone, looking a little worried, and said, "If you don't leave my office right away, I'll call security." With a smile, I turned to lock the door, and then turned my attention back to Huntington. "Perhaps you should wait a minute before doing this, Barton. Here's your choice. You can hang up, talk to me calmly, and then I will leave your office and leave you alone. Or you can call security. By the time they arrive and break down the locked door, I'll beat you up. I guarantee it will hurt." I grinned. "And then, if you decide to sue me for assault, I will tell the court in detail why I attacked you so violently, and I will make sure the press is there to hear my story too. Are you sure you want this?" He glared at me, but I could see him weighing his options. After a few long seconds, he hung up the phone. "And if I talk to you, then will you leave me alone?" I nodded. "I'll unlock the door and open it a couple of inches so you can call your secretary if I get too close to you." "Okay," he said reluctantly, and I opened the door a few inches, as promised. "Wise choice," I said. "Now I just have a few questions for you. I know exactly what you did to Beth and when. I'm just wondering how and why." I waited, watching him think. Finally, he said, "How do I know you're not writing down everything I say?" I saw it coming, and although I didn't like what I had to do next, Beth and I agreed that it was the best option. I walked into his office wearing only a jersey pullover, Penn State sweatpants, and flip-flops. Without saying a word, I took off my shirt, slipped off my flip-flops, and took off my sweatpants, leaving me in just my thong. I slowly turned 360 degrees, so he could see both my back and front, saying, "Do you see a recording device anywhere, Barton? Maybe you should take a closer look at my thong." He shook his head, and I put my clothes back on, then sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Okay, speak up." Barton looked unhappy, but resigned himself. "What do you want to know?" "You gave Beth illegal substances both times." Without the slightest sign of remorse, he said, "Yes, just like I admitted in that fucking letter." He grinned. "Good thing she left it locked in her desk instead of taking it home." I didn't say anything. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "She was ready for anything that night. I definitely would have had sex with her if her damn friend hadn't shown up at the most inopportune moment." He enjoyed giving me a hard time, and I thought about jumping over his desk and beating him to a pulp. But I knew it was important to get him to talk further. "And you weren't worried about the consequences that she would expose you, 'cause you real problems at Ferris?" He shrugged. "I've been here a long time, and I make a lot of money. There might be some unpleasant moments, but eventually they will find a way to keep me. Maybe they fire Beth. Maybe they just pay her compensation. Don't make such a surprised face. Jake is Jake, right?" He grinned again, increasingly confident. "This is the business world. Whoever brings in the money sets the tone. I assure you, this is not the first time that had fun with one of the women in the group." I pretended to feel defeated. Okay, but why the hell Beth? There are plenty of other attractive women in New York, even here at Ferris." His smile grew even wider. "Variety, my dear boy. You can get tired of even the most beautiful woman, you understand. Plus," he leaned towards me as if he was going to share some secret, "Elena in bed is boring. No imagination. She thinks that since she is so beautiful, She doesn't need to do anything except make herself available for me. It gets boring, although you may find it hard to believe. Smug bastard. My contempt for him only increased, but I maintain my composure. You still haven't explained why you chose Beth. There are a lot of attractive women in New York, even at Ferris. He leaned back in his chair, looking as if he was about to light a big Cuban cigar and smoke rings. I could sense that Beth was a real sparkler once you got the process going. I heard her talking Jake. She and Diana were talking about sex in her office when I passed the half-open door and I stopped to listen, and the way she talked about it. Let's just say I could feel her enthusiasm. She didn't say anything particularly revealing. Of course, she didn't give away family secrets. Jake, don't worry. He laughed mockingly. But I could tell just from the tone of her voice that she would be an amazing lover. For the sake of this, it was worth going to considerable effort. It was just bad luck, I guess, that it didn't work out. He sat back again, satisfied with his confession, a smug smile on his face. I again restrained myself from beating him up. It seems that I have answered your questions. Young man, now I will ask you to leave my office and let me get back to work. Feigning defeat, I headed towards the door. You're a bastard, Huntington, and one day I will do something about it, that's a promise. Yes, yes, my boy, I'm sure you will, he replied casually, going back to working on his desk. Don't forget to close the door behind you. I walked out into the waiting room to see Suzanne, who was smiling as she sat at her desk. With her were Beth and a tall, bald man who turned out to be Arnold Rappaport, the head of human resources. Beth ran up to me and hugged me tightly. It was perfect. Jake, we heard every word loud and clear, and everything was recorded on tape. I looked at Suzanne and said, "Thank you, Suzanne." Believe me, it was a pleasure for me, Jake. I knew 2 women he did this to before Beth, and I just hated that he continued to do it with impunity. All I did was install a microphone under his desk, and I would be happy to do more. Is that enough, Arnold? Beth asked Rappaport. Without a doubt, he replied, looking a little serious. With your letter and this recording, plus what Diana Mackenzie and Suzanne have already said, Huntington has no chance of escaping punishment. He walked over to Suzanne's desk and picked up the recorder. Have your lawyer contact me to obtain a copy of this recording, as well as Huntington's original letter if we can retrieve it from his computer. Once you file a claim, we are required to provide all relevant documents. He shook hands with Beth and me, then turned and left the office. Beth hugged Suzanne tightly, then said, "Come on, Jake, we have to meet Diana." I looked at her in surprise, and she added, "We're all going to lunch together to celebrate." When we returned to our hotel room, we were both laughing but shivering from the cold. The beach behind our hotel in Aruba was hot and beautiful, and the crystal-clear blue water was amazing. But as we walked through the air-conditioned lobby toward the elevators, we were both chilled to the bone. She turned off the air conditioner, then ran to the closet and took out 2 terry robes, which we quickly put on. And somehow it happened that we were standing by the bed, hugging each other. Finally, she pulled away and said with a smile, "Why don't you sit on the bed, Jake?" When I sat down, she remained standing in front of me, smiling slyly. Do you remember our long conversation the other day about what happened between Barton and me and what we need to do to get over it? I nodded, and she continued. I want you to know that I listened very carefully to what you said. I know I screwed up, Jake, and I will do anything to prove to you that nothing like that will happen again. But we also talked about this vacation and what each of us hoped to get out of it. And you will now see that I listened very carefully. Wait a minute, I'll quickly go to the bathroom. She disappeared and came out a couple of minutes later, still wearing her robe, tied tightly around her waist. Standing a few feet away from me in the center of the room, she assumed a serious expression and began to recite Beth and Jake's forgiveness vacation rules. Rule 1. Every day of our vacation, I will show Jake how much I regret what I did and how grateful I am for his forgiveness. She unfastened the belt of her robe and parted the hem slightly, so I could see her cleavage. The bikini top was no longer there. Rule 2. Every day I will express my love for Jake. Rule 3. One way to express love is to make love to my husband whenever he wants, without any restrictions. Rule 4. I will give him everything he wants, sexually. Rule 5. Every day I will. Damn it, Jake. I interrupted her reading Rule 5. At that moment, I wanted only one thing: to make love to her, and I did it. Should we wait until tomorrow for Rule 5? She giggled, and I nodded. When I got out of the shower, Beth was already dressed for dinner. She looked tanned and beautiful in her blue sleeveless dress and was talking on the phone. I looked at her questioningly, and she said in a whisper, "Diana," and then continued the conversation. From her answers, I didn't understand much. She only said, "Yeah," and "seriously," and "oh my God, this is amazing." When she finished talking to Diana, she ran up to me and hugged me tightly. "Get dressed quickly, Jake. I'll tell you everything at dinner. It's just too good." We had dinner at an excellent seafood restaurant on the balcony overlooking the Caribbean Sea, and Beth could hardly wait to tell me everything Diana had told her. "I'd start with the bad news, Jake, but the thing is, all the news is good. I'm so happy." I eagerly awaited her story, assuming that this would be the last of what happened to the fall of Barton Huntington. He had already been fired. This happened the very next day after we recorded him in his office. Then there was a lawsuit. At my urging, Beth finally reached out to her father and got the name of the best harassment lawyer in New York. She told her father that it was for a friend. The lawyer, named Richard Dunrave, immediately showed that he knew his business. He filed a lawsuit against Ferris Roberts and then immediately arranged a settlement meeting with the company's lawyers. The result was an $8 million settlement in Beth's favor, with 2 terms proposed by her and Richard. The first condition: she keeps only $50,000 for herself and donates the rest to charity. Beth decided to transfer the money to a women's shelter in New York. The second condition was that Ferris would file a lawsuit against Huntington, who was worth more than $20 million, to recoup the company's payout. Beth agreed that if for some reason the full amount could not be recovered from Huntington, she would accept whatever the court determined. But there was no reason to expect that he would be able to avoid paying the full amount of compensation. The situation in the criminal case remained uncertain. Huntington's highly paid lawyers fought tooth and nail to keep the tape and the letter he wrote to Beth from being admitted into evidence. If this evidence had been accepted, he would have been completely doomed. He faced several years in prison. "Okay, honey, tell me what Diana said." "Well, first of all, she's been promoted to Barton's position. She'll now be in charge of the Far East Division, and she wants me to come back to Ferris as her assistant." "This is amazing," I said. "But haven't you already accepted the new job at Prentice Warfield?" "No, Diana asked me a couple of weeks ago not to give them a final answer. She hoped that she could arrange everything, and now it is approved." We kissed deeply, then raised our glasses of champagne to toast Diana. Then Beth laughed and said, "But that's not all, honey. You don't mind knowing that things are getting worse and worse for poor Barton Huntington, do you?" It turns out that Suzanne and Diana went to a meeting with Elena Romanovskaya. She was in town for a major fashion show, and Suzanne had already contacted her several times at Barton's request. Anyway, Suzanne arranged a meeting with Elena, ostensibly to discuss a surprise party the company was planning for Barton. He and Diana had a short conversation with Elena, after which they left her one interesting audio recording. She looked at me, her eyes sparkling with pleasure, and I motioned for her to continue. "Last night, there was a big reception and press conference after the first day of the fashion show. All the local newspapers covered it, plus fashion magazines, of course. And our Elena made a small scene. She dumped an entire plate of rigatoni with red sauce on his head, shouting, 'So I'm bored in bed? So you use illegal substances to sleep with others? You're just pathetic.' And then she turned around, but came back again, ripped the huge engagement ring he bought her off her finger, and threw it into his lap and said, 'Here's your piece of shit, you fucking asshole.'" Beth nearly choked with laughter. The press was watching this from the front row, and two newspapers printed a photo of him looking dazed and covered in the lunch she dumped on him. After enjoying desserts for a long time, Beth and I went to one of the casinos where we drank a little and gambled for a couple of hours, losing about $150 of Barton Huntington's money. Then they returned to the room and made love, and then fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on the door and saw my smiling wife in a robe letting the waiter in with the breakfast I had ordered. When we had eaten, she quickly put on her underwear and a light dress and said, "You will be on your own for a couple of hours, dear. Want to grab a book and sunbathe by the pool. I will meet you at the Garden restaurant at 12:30. Beth didn't tell me what she was doing and left me with a mysterious smile. I spent the morning reading, relaxing in the sun, and swimming a few laps in the hotel pool when it got too hot. At 12:30, I saw that Beth had clearly pampered herself. Her hair was washed and styled, her nails were manicured. We had a pleasant lunch together, and then Beth took my hand and led me back upstairs. She sat me down on the bed again and began to recite. "Two more rules, Jake. Are you ready? Rule 5. Every day of our vacation, I will give my husband a sexual surprise. Go take off your clothes in the bathroom, dear, and come back quickly." I quickly did as she said, waiting to see what was in store for me next. When I returned to the bedroom, I stopped in my tracks. When it was all over and we were relaxing together, dozing in each other's arms under the covers, I said, "There was another rule, if I'm not mistaken." She looked at me and said, "Yes, honey. If you don't mind, I won't get up. I like being in your arms too much. But here it is. Rule 6. When the forgiveness vacation is over, I will stop apologizing for what I did, and we will move on with our lives. But the love and affection will last as long as we live, and sexual surprises too, from time to time. If that's right for you, Jake." I told her it was more than suitable. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.